Roger, go for deploy.
So what you been up to?
I have been up to so much. Like, when did we last speak? It's got to be a year ago, right?
Yeah, I think it would have been a long time. A year and a half, maybe? 18 months?
Yeah, so I had a hip
Yeah.
operation since
Yeah.
we spoke.
Yeah.
And then I guess, like, as I was recovering from that, I sort of started to look at really getting back to a more basic lifestyle. So I've been doing a lot of, like, health exploring, both sort of mental and physical, and also just going back to making a lot of my own stuff, you know, like I've been getting into making hand lines for fishing, and then, like, going and fishing, and then, like, catching the food, and then eating it, and then... just recently, I made my own knife from scratch, which was really freaking cool.
Out of what?
A car leaf
Knives.
spring.
It's made into other knives.
I just bought one at the store.
I've got a fork and I'm welding it all together.
No, it's like, do you know what a leaf spring in a car is?
No.
So basically, it's like the shock absorbers in a car. So there's sort of these bits of steel under your car that allow for. I feel like I shouldn't be explaining this to two men, but
A car is essentially an automobile that...
Boys.
So, and it's like it's made of steel, and it's the strongest steel you can get. So basically, you can get them rusty off like in any car yard. And a friend of mine had a forge, a little one that he made out of a gas canister, and so he just started from scratch and, like, heated it up and banged it, like, did all the blacksmithing, and then got the grinder out and, like, designed the knife and carved it out with the grinder, and, like, every step of the way I did myself. So it was pretty cool.
That's cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I didn't know what kind of knife I wanted or what shape I wanted, so I was just making it up as I went along, and it is beautiful. Like, then I got, like, a chunk of wood and carved the wooden handle for it, and put,
Wow.
and then, like, another friend had a native beehive, and I got the wax from the native beehive and, like, waxed the handle, and then
Oh, shit.
went out and shot a kangaroo and, like, tanned the
Really?
leather hide,
Yeah.
and then made the sheath out of the kangaroo leather hide, and pulled all the sinew out of the tail and used that for stitching and everything. So it's
Yeah.
like the most basically from scratch sort
And what
of.
inspired you to do all this?
Hates
It
kangaroos.
was there.
Don't like them?
I felt like some kangaroo tail stew, you know.
Yeah.
No, I just it was there, and the guy was like, I can teach you how to build a knife. And I do outdoor stuff all the time, and I have quite the collection of knives for that. So I just thought it'd be really cool to have one that I made from scratch, and it's beautiful.
Do you know what's fascinating about this? I'm reading a book at the moment called Lost Connections by Johann Hari.
Yeah.
And have you heard of it?
No.
Oh, fuck, you'd love it. It's basically why the prevalence of anxiety and depression is so prevalent in
Right.
our current society, you know? We were talking on a Shoot the Shit episode we did just before about, like, the release of dopamine and these feel-good hormones in response to things that we become addicted to and all this sort of stuff, you know. And for you to go back to a very primitive state, you must feel so much more fulfilled, because the art of, like, catching your own food, hunting it, and then preparing it, like, was a huge release of dopamine back in the day. But now we have everything by abundance, so we can press a button and we don't need to do all that shit. But we're taking away what's allowed us to survive to 2018.
Definitely, and along those lines, there's that whole movement about we're too comfortable, you know. So we're looking back at getting back into making yourself uncomfortable, which is sort of where you can grow from, and the space that you can develop in, and that's sort of the same thing. But it was this, like, I've never loved a physical object as much as I love this knife.
Yeah. Shit, that's dangerous. Have you got it?
No.
No.
No, I just been flying around too much. I didn't want to lose it at the airport. You know, I've lost so many knives going through the scanners there. But so it was a really cool experience to do it. And I did end up making sort of a skinning knife. So then I'm, you know, sort of going to be able to go back and use it for that. And I've also gotten into bow hunting. So
Great.
doing, you know, I mean, I was vegetarian for 23 odd years.
Yep.
And my philosophy is, you know, if I want to eat it, I probably should kill it myself. And I know I don't look like the person that's just going to be out there killing little bunnies. But so I figure, you know, that's a really good way of getting my own food, and then you're not contributing to what the world's going through. Like, a lot of people are vegan because they don't want to put pressure on a system. But if you can go out and shoot a couple of bunnies, and you know, I don't eat much, so that would be my meal for a couple of nights, and then use the skin for whatever I'm doing. And so it's just, you know, it's just sort of looking at the way we used to live and just learning some skills along those lines.
How much do you think you would have benefited from doing all this and, like, understanding how to do it when you were on Survivor?
I wasn't on Survivor.
Yeah.
I was on
On Natural... I've forgotten it. So let's say hypothetically if you're on Survivor.
If I wasn't Survivor. Naked and afraid.
Naked and afraid. Sorry, that's right. I remember I have like this vision of like you being naked on this YouTube video that I was watching. I was like, oh, Survivor's like getting you to do weird shit here. This is allowed.
Have you heard of the TV show Naked and Afraid?
No.
So,
Are you naked on an island?
But you're not afraid.
Yeah, I wasn't afraid. Well, basically about 5 years ago, Discovery came up with this very extreme concept. They wanted to really push the boundaries of survival shows, and they knew of me because I'd hiked across the Sierra Nevadas with a pocket knife and lived off the land. So
Cool.
I documented that and got sponsors for it and everything. So they were looking for, 6 of the most kick-ass survival women they could find, and I don't know, they knocked on my door and they said, just listen.
A door that you'd made, obviously, from the land. And
it was
then-
just,
It was just like a kangaroo
carved
skin,
with my
essentially.
own hands.
Yeah, that's right. Hello, come to my hut.
So they, I was in Byron Bay on holiday, and they're like, "Okay, Kai, I know we've come at you with some shows before, but this one, just stay with us." And they said it's called Naked and Afraid, and I was like, "No, thank you." Because I'm not a nudist. I'm not the person who gets out there and gets naked. I've barely skinny dipped in my life, so it was definitely outside my comfort zone. But it was the first season of the show, and it was the most extreme survival concept that anyone had ever come up with. And so basically they drop you out in the wilderness with one other person, so a male and female, and you don't know them, and you get one item. So you have 21 days to survive with one item.
And the other person, because you might not get along.
Yeah, well, that's what they do. They try and match you up with someone that
to
has...
create drama and conflict.
Yeah, absolutely, because it is reality TV after all. So I did the first season, and it went from this concept that nobody knew anything about to being Discovery's biggest hit TV show. So they've done over 100 episodes so far, and
Right.
they've gone from the 21-day, they do like a big 40-day challenge with... like a whole bunch of people rather than just the two people. They keep begging me every 40-day challenge, like, please, come on, and I'm like,
Did you win?
there's no winning or losing, Basically, you last as long as you can last. And
How long did you last?
21 days. There's no way I'm tapping out.
And what was your tool?
So
your item?
I would have always brought a knife,
Yeah.
but you give them 3 tools that you would bring out. And for me, it would always be a knife, a pot, and I can start fire by rubbing sticks together, but anytime you get a fire lighter in a situation, you're saving calories that you're burning. So, it would be those 3 items, and they gave me the fire lighter as my item. So, and then you have to be like, this is the one I chose. And
Right.
But so it was an interesting concept, and to this date, producers say they've never put anyone in such a harsh environment as where they put me. So I was in the Louisiana swamplands, and it was shit.
Really?
But
How did the other dude go?
he survived too for the 21 days.
If he goes, say on day 14, do you go 7 days by yourself, or once one person checks out?
No, you can stay.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but we had such extreme weather, and we had such an extreme environment that most of my energy, he wasn't mentally prepared for the challenge, and most of my energy went into keeping Billy in the game because I needed whatever muscle he could provide each day. It was the coldest May on record. We needed fire burning 24/7, so a lot of our energy and stuff was collecting wood, and if I just had that extra pair of hands, it just made it. So every night Billy would quit, and every night I'd talk him into staying one more day, and it was like we got through the 21 days. So it was pretty extreme.
Did you how much of the show was scripted? Like, how a lot of people say, "Oh, reality TV shows, this and that." Like, was there? I don't know. Yeah.
None for us.
None.
We were the experiment. So they wanted to make it as extreme as anything's ever been done, and so as wasn't scripted. I know that sort of some of the later episodes and things like that, they ran out of survival experts. So now they've got like Zumba instructors and things like that going out there. And that's kind of what I love about the show, though, because, it's proving that anyone can do this. Survival is such an elitist game where people think you have to be a big, tough, strong man to go out there. But it's really like the attitude that you go into the situation
Well, it's a true
with.
essence of us, isn't it? We're designed to survive. So when you take away all your comforts, it really comes down to, okay, what we're made to do.
Yeah. And it all comes down to this. Like, you can have the toughest guy with the most amount of gear, and he can go out into a survival situation and crumble because he's just not mentally ready for it. And you can have like some little old granny that's wandered off into the wilderness on Easter weekend, and she survives 3 months out there because she's got what it takes up top. So
what do you think it takes to have what it takes?
I know it's very cliche, but you need to be able to not dwell on what you don't have and be as positive as possible. So there's that whole be positive, and that's one of the things I teach in my motivational thing. People often tell you how to be positive, but they don't tell you how to be positive, and it's like a muscle. I feel like if you flex it and practice it, then it will become your go-to eventually, rather than something that seems so cliche. But I do think keeping a positive mental attitude and not focusing on the things you can't change are probably two of the most important things.
So how would someone flex their positive muscle?
Well, one of the ways that I talk about is realizing that, the saying, this too shall pass. Right. So, just recognizing that whatever situation you're in may feel helpless or hopeless, but it won't necessarily be forever. And just acknowledging that allows you to take a breath and sit with the situation, and then maybe focus on those things that you can change. And I also, by being positive, it is looking at what you can do something about and what you can't do something about. So the serenity prayer is one thing. I'm not religious, but with that, it's let me change the things I can change and learn how to live with the things that I can't,
And the courage to tell the difference.
And the courage to tell the difference. And I think that's a really important thing. So when I'm out in the swamp for 21 days, I didn't talk about food. I didn't dwell on food. I didn't talk about being warm. I didn't think about being warm. I just looked at what was going on and found ways to make improvements on the situation I had that were tangible and achievable, rather than being I'd really like to have a bed right now.
Yeah.
So that helps you be positive about the situation you're in as well.
And even, I reckon, in everyday experiences, just celebrating your wins.
Yes.
As adults, we're so hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
We're so high achievers, and it's good to have standards. Don't ever decrease your standards, but I think it's super important that we celebrate our wins.
Definitely.
And because then that can start to build inner confidence and trust in yourself.
Yep.
Rather than going, well done today, but. It's, you're not installing that confidence, that self-belief, that acknowledgement of, hey, I actually worked for something and I achieved something.
Yeah. And one of the things I talk to people about as well is so I had this hamstring injury, and I was on the couch, and I'm such an active person. I can't sit still for hardly any time at all. And all of a sudden I had to sit still. So in order to feel like I achieved something in a day, I'd make a list, but the list would be get up.
We were talking about this today.
We just made a list.
Oh, really?
We made a list. We were talking about lists.
It's so important. And so you feel like you've achieved something in a day. I'd literally have get up, and then I'd have do my exercises. I'd even put things like eat breakfast, so at the end of the day, even though there were things I would have done anyway, I could just go, I did that, I did that, so, that's again acknowledging the wins that you had in the day and the little successes as you go along.
Yeah, and you get that little dopamine rush. I think at the end of the day, making a list, because I've just come back from a Vedic meditation course.
Wow.
And I'm about to do a Vipassana retreat.
That's huge.
Yeah.
How long are you going for?
It's a 10-day silent meditation. Yeah. So I'm super excited. Also a bit fearful of it as well.
Definitely.
And anyway, I did this Vedic meditation. I've been meditating for a couple of years now, but this, long story short, Vedic just really resonated with me, and I just needed to do this. And anyway, 4 days of going to this, my teacher's house, and she taught me over 4 days how to do this, and just totally changed my perspective on making lists.
Right.
And defining what is success. And, we make all these lists, but at the end of the day, these lists are just providing some comfort and some certainty, maybe in some uncertain times.
Definitely.
And it's not meaning that lists are bad. It's you need some sort of hope to get you through, whether you're religious, spiritual, whether you do your lists or your gratitudes, you always hold on to something that's going to help you get you through. And it's really interesting that in a time where you were a bit uncertain and you couldn't move, you needed to hold on to something, make a list, feel good. That little feel good hormone snowballs into a bigger snowball, and then it's just like pulling a truck. The hardest part's the first pull, but once you have momentum, maybe those lists aren't needed as much anymore, and
Yeah.
you find some other momentum to keep going as well.
Yeah, definitely. So it can be a big game changer.
I love that. I really just am obsessed with like the understanding of evolution at the moment. I think it's just so fascinating to like take in my own personal development to learn more about, you know, the understanding and the concept of ego, and then looking how that funnels and plays in my life, and like, you know, again, like get a dopamine kick and all this sort of stuff. And like we really just are built to survive, you know. I just think it's fascinating. I really do love it.
Another thing I love about it though is like that there's no right or wrong way of doing it. Like you're talking about the ego, like so I wrote a book about survival. We probably discussed it last time, and one of the reasons I wrote it was because everybody was overcomplicating survival, you know, and they were making it seem like there was one way of doing it. Like, okay, so this is how you make a fire, and there's no other way. So I'm like, there's like 70 different ways of making a fire, you know, and
Skin a cat.
and so I know it comes like there's a whole
It's
new
all cliche
meaning.
here,
I know.
Yeah, everyone wants to do it today. And,
I
you
know. I
when
can't
was
even
on-
can't even say there's like so many ways to skin a cat now. After all this rabbit skinning I've been doing, I'm like, but you know, so
There's only one way to skin a rabbit, though, right?
no, there's so many ways to skin a rabbit. There's this really cool method, like you pull a sock off. It's really weird.
Oh shit!
But anyway, we won't get into that. I don't know your audience.
Yeah,
but
they're just rabbit skinning.
right,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
perfect. Well,
Yeah.
they love it.
Venture radio, rabbit skinning. Yeah.
But that's what, you know, you can let go of all the ego around it, because you can find your own way of doing it. You know, like with this making of the knife, I was like, well, am I going to do it wrong? And the person that was teaching me, he just kept saying there is no wrong way. Just do what you want to do with it, you know. And so you can just let go of all the ego out there and just play and experiment and
But even in the workforce, it's like, you know, you have these bosses, and very stereotypically here, you know, you have these bosses that, you know, typically have a bit of an ego, and this is the way I want you to do it, and this is the way I teach you. And you know, you get people in here that may be more creative than you, or a bit more abstract than you, or a bit more literal thinking than you, and they just see a different way, and they can see some efficiencies. But then it's like, no, well, that's the wrong way to do it. It should be, you work for the outcome, achieve the outcome, whichever path you want to take to get there, I'll meet you there. And hopefully you can teach me a faster way.
yeah.
But there's the right and wrong, because it gives me authority, it gives me power, you know, to have that over you.
Yeah. So, and being a female in a survival world is always very fascinating too, because you do come up with the characters that are like, here, let me show you. I can show you how it's done. And it's just like, you know, that's a real challenge to my ego at times too, because, you know, it constantly feels threatened and undermined a bit. So it's always good for me to look at how I'm responding to situations and see if it's coming from my own stuff or what's going on out there. So
Do you still notice a prevalence with that in terms
Absolutely.
of? Yeah, right.
yeah, just recently I was doing a trip with a couple of guys, and we were doing it in my home turf, and one was an American, one was Australian, and then there was me, but it was my outdoors. And you know, the dude would ask a question and I'd answer it, and he'd like check with the other guy to make sure, and I'd just be like,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
Now still, you know, after
yeah.
everything I've done? So there's definitely, I mean, and I get it. I guess, you know, like if you've got a gladiator and me standing next to each other, and somebody's like, the world's coming to an end, of course you're going to run to the big muscly dude, you know, like you're not going to be like, well, maybe she's got some good skills. So
Maybe not. Like, we just had an interview with a police officer, and he was like in the Marine Corps from like 16 years old and all this sort of shit. And he was saying that like some of the worst soldiers are the big buffy ones that fucking are really slow, and they
Right.
can't carry shit, and they just suck, you know?
Yeah.
And like he said that he seemed like, you know, a little, not little, but he didn't seem like, this is a mammoth of a bloke. He seemed like a, you know, standard 5'11" sort of.
You're saying I'm a bad soldier?
Yeah, you're a bad soldier, mate.
Bad soldier.
You're a lovely fella. Yeah, get out of your own house. Yeah, but it's interesting. I think that the reason probably people would run to that gladiator is probably because what we see in the movies.
Right,
you know?
absolutely.
And you have a part to play in that.
well, you know, I also have a part to play with the strong female role
It's
models.
true. It's true. It is very true. Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm always playing the heroes, so
Yeah.
it doesn't, well, used to.
Yeah. And so talk to us about your hamstring. So what's the go there now? Like, are you,
So since we spoke, they then discovered a whole bunch of stuff in my hip, and so
Okay.
they had to go back in and do that. And then, you know, and they seem to be very keen on labeling me as 25% disabled.
What?
Which
They're
I
so
think,
quick to do that. But doesn't that just close your world in the fact that now that sets your limitation, and it takes a strong person to not
accept that. 100%. 100%.
And it's like,
I just think it's hilarious because it's like I'm probably fitter and stronger than 99% of the world's population.
Of the person telling you that.
Yeah. Right.
Probably.
And, like I go to the gym and I'm very determined and I'll work out and, like I'm super fit, super strong. There's not much I can't do. And then I'm like, wow, guess what, people? This is 25% disabled.
Yeah.
That's just ridiculous.
But then, what is a sad thing if there's people out there that may not be as quotation marks, strong and may play a bit more of a victim, and then they're going to use that as an excuse.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm 25% disabled, now I can't do this, and now I snowball my weight and my health, and all of a sudden they're cutting years off their life. They might have diabetes and they're not a role model for their kids because they're using that as an excuse. And just that one label that person has put on you in that time could snowball and manifest into a completely different world for you.
Yeah, so the thing I do with motivational speaking is my sort of tagline is don't let others put their limitations on you. And the reason for that is the car accident I had at 19, being told that I wouldn't be able to be physically active. Now they treat that injury way differently. They keep you moving and they keep the muscles around and they keep everything moving, and it probably would have been a completely different diagnosis and outcome anyway. But I've met people who've said to me, like, oh, I broke my back too. And then they have listened to the doctor and used that as an excuse and used that as a reason. And they're unfit and unhealthy and their back is just killing them and they can't do anything in their life. And so the reason I speak with motivational speaking is to just tell people that, listen to yourself, listen to your own voice and your own intuition about what's going on for you. And yes, doctors have degrees and yes, they have medical knowledge backing it, but there is no one body that is the same, and no one body is going to respond to a situation like every other body. And so you got to listen to your own body. And also doctors have to give you the worst possible case scenario. Like they have to say, this is what it could be.
They have to cover their ass.
But they forget to tell you that it might, this is what it doesn't have to be either.
Exactly.
So it's...
I would also go as far as saying that doctors, I don't know, maybe there's not a holistic perspective on health and wellness there. Every experience I've had, I would go to a surgeon. You go to a surgeon to get surgery. You don't go to a surgeon to get a second opinion.
Not the root cause.
No, of course they do. And the people they hang around with are constantly validating the understanding that pharmaceutical drugs are good and they work. And I'm not saying none of them don't work, But so this book, right, that talks about this Hamilton scale, and I'm moving into depression here. So not physical injury, but obviously mental health issues. There's this thing called the Hamilton scale that measures the severity of depression with someone from 0 to 51. And apparently, a good SSRI, a serotonin uptaker, decreases you from about 1.8 to about 1.8 points on the scale. So from 51 to 49.2, whatever it is, from suicidal to maybe not as suicidal, is significant. That's good. But a good night's sleep is 6 points. A good night's sleep is 6 points.
Yeah.
And you have a look about, it's just always important to take an objective perspective, not only on yourself, but what we're doing in society.
Yeah.
And apparently, as the statistic states, over 50% of Americans are overweight, depressed, and on one form of pharmaceutical drug. And you just got to look at that and think, fuck, is that working? Or maybe that people that are doing some sort of holistic approach maybe have an answer as well.
Here's the thing, right? They're either taking that pharmaceutical drug, and there's a nerve in our body called the vagus nerve, and it runs from the head to the stomach, or more importantly, the stomach to the head. There's 9 times more receptors going from the stomach to your head. That's why they say the gut and brain connection is so strong. They take these pharmaceutical drugs, and what it does is it tears their gut inside. And so, on a really ease of conversation purposes, it sort of tears that signal to their brain. So it interferes with your general receptors. Dopamine could be one of them, So when they're on these pharmaceuticals, yes, it could be treating the symptom in the time, but what's it doing to treat the root cause over a long time?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Sometimes maybe putting a Band-Aid on is not the best thing.
Oh,
you know?
I don't know that putting a Band-Aid on is ever a good thing, unless you really do have a cut.
Yeah,
It's
like
gonna be infected.
bleeding out real hard. Yeah, just relax, Kai.
Even then, I just wash it out with a bit of water.
Yeah,
but-
just rub some dirt in it.
Yeah.
Cut it with a knife. Yeah.
The interesting thing, we were talking about Wim Hof just before we started the podcast. Now, the interesting thing for me is he has been teaching this Wim Hof method for quite a number of years now, and science is now catching up. So there was a scientist at a talk I went to recently, and the guy's like, it's going to probably take us 20 years to catch up to what he's discovered, but science is now proving that the breathing and the ice baths have this incredible effect, because they're now able to measure the rate of success and what's happening in his body, but not just his body, because everybody was like, yeah, he's the Iceman, he's this anomaly. But now they can take anyone, and within 4 days, they can be having the same bodily physical reaction to stimulus that this Wim Hof, who used to be thought of as a god or just a complete anomaly, is. So, they're now scientifically able to prove that the gut is so important, and they're now scientifically able to prove that breathing is very important, and that cold showers can reduce the inflammation, and this and that can be going on, so
But you know what, it's tough though, and so I'm in the holistic field, so I use a science-based approach. So I do DNA testing, and then I match a nutritional and physical program to your DNA. And
Interesting.
it's freaking amazing, and it's changing people's lives. And I use that science-based, and it's evidence-backed. But then I put a whole holistic view on it and treat the root cause of gut health. And from there, it just transcends into improving health and longevity, right? Don't know where I was going. Oh, yeah, but sorry, a holistic view. It's hard to then make money on oxygen, tell someone to breathe properly.
Right. Well, that's the thing.
Right. If you actually you want to decrease your stress, well, how about you breathe into your diaphragm?
Right.
And there was a study, a Japanese study that has 6 breaths. 6 deep breaths into your diaphragm is the minimum effective dose in changing your response. And so if you teach someone just to breathe into their stomach, say 10 times before they go and eat, and we're talking about gut and brain, and they're eating in a stressed out state, eating in a stressed out state might be okay one time. You do it every single day, which we do eat, and tomorrow's going to happen, it just snowballs into a huge health problem that creates disordered eating patterns that then influences the brain. But I can't make money on telling you to eat. To breathe to change your stress response.
Yeah, I mean, you can make money on teaching people that,
yes,
though.
yes. But when you're talking about big pharma and you're talking about competing with doctors and
absolutely.
surgeons, they're like, no, we'll take this medication because you can't.
Show me your degree, dickhead.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I've been breathing for my whole life.
But that's what they're so scared of,
Yeah.
Like that's why they try and block it at every, like the doctors tell you that, a friend of mine was super, super sick, and he had a lot of thyroid problems, and he was doing his own research, and was told that he needed to get his thyroid out, had to have surgery, and he researched everything and found that paleo had some impact on helping with those issues. And, he was getting depressed and anxiety ridden and stuff like that. So he spoke to his doctor and said, you know what, I've heard that paleo has had some kind of impact. And the doctor's like, well, that could be dangerous. And he's like, what, eating meat and vegetables?
But you're not getting enough calcium from milk, It's very important.
It's like, what do you mean just eating meat and veg is going to be dangerous to my health?
What do you mean just eating whole food?
Yeah. But where's your sugar from? Apparently milk became really big in the States after the Second World War, or I think it was the First World War, when they were supplying all these like cans of milk over to the soldiers, because they needed some way to get them easy to drink whole foods and all this sort of stuff. And then when they came back, they had this massive supply of calcium and milk in these cans.
Yeah.
And they were like, fuck, what do we do with all this? So they started pumping out these marketing campaigns saying how nutritious they were. How's that?
It's
insane.
Crazy why things have gotten to where they've got to, you know?
Marketing and just money and shit. And
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I love it. So, how's the motivational talks going then?
You're
You're in Melbourne? Where are you currently living in?
Torquay.
Yes.
So just the other side of Melbourne.
Yeah.
I was away and you don't know much about me, so
No.
I'll
Climax,
speak to you.
man.
Well, the listeners as well. I'm just a listener, thoroughly enjoying sitting on my couch,
Eating my food.
listening to a live podcast.
Yeah, that's right.
Wasting my time. I should be doing so much of it right now.
Eating milk.
Breathing.
That's true.
I hope you are. So I was in North America for 16 years, and then hamstring happened, and
That's what you're doing a stunt.
Yeah,
great.
and my whole family had moved from Adelaide to Torquay while I was gone, so it just seemed like the place to come back to, and it's a beautiful little town, and I love it, so I'm hardly ever there. I'm sort of, you don't make knives in Torquay, and you definitely can't shoot animals because people look at you a bit weirdly. So I've been doing a lot of exploring up in Queensland and Western Australia, getting out bush as much as I can. Like the whole going back to nature. I mean, there's all these movements that are going on at the moment that I'm like, I'm part of that without even knowing. Like the whole grounding. They talk about how important it is to be barefoot and that. Like I'm just 90. Well done. You just need to be on the grass
On the
now.
timber floors.
I'm barefoot on my couch.
Yeah. Killing it.
But it's like, so I mean, I'm like 90% barefoot out there, and then, just talking about how important being in touch with nature is and all that sort of thing. So, hardly ever in Torquay, but loving life, doing my motivational speaking. I actually have forced myself to sort of rent a little place away from everyone else because I'm trying to write my second book. But, that doesn't happen when I'm playing with knives and stuff.
Hey, quick question.
Yes.
For someone who, clearly I'm barefoot now and get out and see the sun first thing in the morning to reset my circadian rhythm and do Wim Hof breathing and meditate every single morning and things like that. And I have this ideal world. What are some of the ways that you fit getting back to at the core essence of what we're meant to be in nature? How do you fit that into a successful third dimensional daily routine of work and family and kids and practicality?
Well, I didn't have kids, so that was the first thing that was very helpful.
Don't do what everyone else is doing.
I think the way you need to fit it in is to make it a priority. Make it important. So often we make time for things that are important to us, but the other little things that we think might be important sort of fall by the wayside. And I get quite a lot of people saying to me, like, oh man, you inspire me, but I could never go outdoors. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you just, like right next to Torquay is, I think it's the Yangs or whatever, like you can drive there and go for a hike. It takes an hour. The beach is right there. Like just make, even if it's 15 minutes a day, make those things a priority. Like you find that the getting back to nature and the things that you're doing with the Wim Hof breathing and meditation, and you may not need as much sleep doing those things. They're the things that light you up and give you energy and inspire you. So I think the main thing is to just start. That's the hardest part with any of this stuff is realize that. So coming off a major injury, like I hate being unfit, and I spent 3 months in a wheelchair, had a full brace thing, and all I could do for 3 months was do this.
Yeah.
And so I hate starting from scratch because I know that then I'm going to be sore, I'm going to be tired, I'm going to be just uncomfortable, but I also know that eventually I won't be. So it's just the starting. I think you may be a little bit tired, but Wim Hof breathing takes 5 minutes to do 3 rounds of breathing. They say 5-minute cold shower at the end of Wim Hof, but they've cut that down to realizing that 30 seconds of a cold shower is enough. So you don't actually have to have the cold shower the whole time. You can have a warm shower in the last 30 seconds. You just turn it off. You're in the shower anyway. So these are things that don't require a great deal of adjustment. They're things that you're doing anyway. And 3 minutes of breathing 3 rounds of breathing can take 5 minutes. So just set your alarm for 6:25. Do your breathing. When you're having the shower, turn it to cold. You can make minute adjustments that don't, take a lot out of your time of day, but can give you such great health benefits. Like go barefoot. At first your feet will be a little bit sore, but if you are going for a hike, just take your shoes off for 5 minutes. Go out into your back lawn, wander around on your back lawn for 5 minutes while you're mowing the lawn or something. Probably not the safest thing in the world to be mowing with no shoes, but just even having it in the back of your mind and making a commitment to it, I think you can make little changes which have a big impact on you.
Yeah, well, we've just laid some turf, and so we're in the middle of watering it every single night.
Yeah.
And so I have shoes off, compulsory, just takes 20 minutes, half hour to water all the lawn there, and it's grounding right before bed.
Yep. And bring the outside inside, get some pot plants, they call them pot plants here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
In America, they
Those
don't.
things?
Yeah, in
What do they call them over there?
Oh, they just call them house plants, and everybody thinks that I start growing marijuana and
Yeah.
stuff. They're just like, oh, you've got the pot plants.
Yeah, start smoking marijuana, It's,
You should fill your house with pot plants.
That's true. I definitely. So, what would you say to someone then that is like sort of in the pre-contemplation stage, in the stages of change model? Where they're like, because what I find is that I don't try to be motivational, but if someone asks me about something, I'll say what really works for me. And he goes, oh yeah, that's really cool, and then someone will probably be inspired for like 2 minutes, and then we'll just go back to doing the shit they keep doing. Do you know what I mean?
I've got a good analogy.
Sorry, mate, you're not Kai. Yeah, go on.
Go on, Kai.
So it'd be the similar thing as like, I don't know, you're driving on the road, you're on your phone when you shouldn't be on your phone, and then there's like a police car and you hear the police car behind, and then it's like, woo, you're like, oh fuck, and then it drives past you and you're like, oh, and then you're driving really, really well for like a day, and then you're just on your phone straight away again.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Same shit again. So like, what would you say to someone that's in that level?
Well, I think it's really hard. Like, you would probably find this in what you do, because it's that another say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them move.
Full of cliches and expressions here.
Why not?
Yeah.
And people ask you for help, and you can see what will make big changes in their life. And like, my dad is very much struggling with his health, and I know that if he went gluten-free, sugar-free, then that would be 90% of the inflammation in his body would be knocked out. And when I'm home, I make sure that he's eating that way, and he feels so much better. I leave and he goes back to normal things. So it's really hard, because you could only give the people the information, and it's like this seesaw. You have like the want and the need there, and it's like they have to get to a stage where they feel like their life is going to be better if they make the changes. And I guess, the thing with natural remedies is it's not an instant fix. That's why people go to drugs. Like, I've got a headache. Yeah, I could do the Wim Hof breathing, or I could just take this Panadol, and that Panadol takes 2 seconds to down. Wim Hof breathing in a cold shower will take 10 minutes out of my day.
And I've got to do something.
And I've got to do something. So, it's encouraging people to know that it takes longer, but it's a way more positive effect on your body and way more lasting in the long run. And
well, prevention's better than cure, right?
Right.
And so as humans, we're motivated either towards pleasure or away from pain. And a lot more people are motivated away from pain.
Yeah.
And so even with your hamstring injury, like, just say you might not see a physio or a chiro or whatever, and then all of a sudden you're in enough pain. It's like, nah, I've got to go see someone about my hamstring. I've got to go see someone about my back, about my sleep or whatever. And it costs them money.
Yeah.
Versus preventing that, going towards pleasure and going, okay, excellent, for me to improve my sleep, I need to get sunlight first thing in the morning. I need to, no matter what, I'm going to walk the dog tonight in barefoot.
Right.
And it's those little things that keep me going. I think prevention, because I've been injured before, and it gets you down mentally more than it does physically. Well, for me anyway.
For sure, absolutely.
Yeah, and I just don't ever want to start again, because I know what it takes to get back to the level. So anything, like, just during that injury period, anything is better than nothing. So prevention is better than cure. Moving toward pleasure than waiting for pain to hit, enough pain. Like, for example, with your dad, same thing with my parents. They're getting older. In fact, probably not as now, because they've done the DNA testing and dad's lost 15 kilo, mum's lost just under 10. Like, they've added years to their life. But up until, say, a year ago, their health was rapidly declining. And then I said to mum and dad, all of my grandparents died when I was too young. And they had, and some of them had Alzheimer's as well. So it wasn't a very nice feeling being a kid, knowing that your grandparents don't know who you are. And obviously with the DNA testing, that's uncovered that. And so I said to mum and dad, being in the health and fitness industry for so many years, you can't force someone on. You can't force your philosophies on. You can see what they need, but you can't tell your parents to do something. They're your parents. Yeah. They tell you what to do.
You. Go to your room.
Exactly. And so there was enough pain caused here because I said to them, hey, listen, I'm going to be having kids with Perry.
Yeah.
I don't want what happened to my kids, what happened with me, with my grandparents. Guys, you are on your way to premature Alzheimer's at 65. Yes. And, you know, you're taking years off your life with your current lifestyle. And that was enough pain for them to move towards pleasure.
Right.
Now they've got that snowball going. Now they've totally changed their life. Now they've totally changed their diet. Now they're working in sync with their DNA. It's crazy. But for me, why wait? It's easy to say why wait to get enough pain. But I think a lot of people need to get into a state of pain to really be hungry for pleasure.
What also is hard to explain is the fuzziness that comes along with, like, you get into survival mode. You know, like the fight or flight is just firing, and like they talk about the whole reptilian brain and all that sort of thing. But you know, like if you're foggy and just merely getting by and getting through, it's a very hard place to just stop and make positive change from, you know, because if you're super tired, then all you want is caffeine every morning. And it's hard to explain to somebody, like, you know what, that caffeine's actually sort of helping making you tired because your body's really acidic as a result of it. You know, and of course for every study that comes out, it's like coffee's bad, there's like somebody going, but coffee's good because I want to drink it, you know. Like, so you know, it's sort of the brain, I think what you're talking about, the gut brain thing, like that's the thing with my dad, is he gets really foggy, and so you get really tired and you're like, okay, what's my go-to when I get tired? I hit a sugar or I hit a caffeine, you know, and so you just get in this roller coaster, but you can't get enough clarity. Like in survival we talk about the stop, look and listen. So basically the surest way you're going to end your life is by not thinking about and not making a plan. So the first thing you do when you realize everything's gone to shit is you stop and you sit down for a second, and even if you just make a cup of tea or just give yourself a moment to have that clarity, and then from that space you can go forward. But we just don't stop, look and listen in life. You know, we don't take that second to have that clarity to be like, okay, well, this really isn't working. But also we're surrounded by people who've done it for years. You know, well, my grandparents did it and they're all fine. And I say, wow, were they though? But, you know, we're also looking at generations that had cleaner food and cleaner air and less chemicals, less sort of cell phones and all things floating around. So, you know, we're in a generation, we don't know how to deal with it, but everything around us is creating a fog and a fuzz that's very hard to get clarity from.
But it also shouldn't even matter what anyone else does, what your parents did or your grandparents did. That's like cool. Like, who cares if they were even like the happiest people in the world? Like, you're not them. Like, you got to figure out the shit that works for you, you know? I
think it's just easy to justify behavior.
But it is.
It
is.
Like, if
so easy.
Like, you know, when you're a kid and you got into trouble, you're like, but he did it first.
Yeah.
You know, it's like...
When you're a kid.
Yeah.
Very true. Yeah. No, but like taking my dad, for example, and I know he'll be listening to the show, so I love him. I love your dad. But, you know, he's a classic example of someone that goes, oh, you know, like, but... oh, sure, I could probably afford to lose a few here, but like, you know, I mean, it's not near as bad as, you know, or this and that, you know, all it's like, oh, it's okay because I'm not as bad as this person. Or this, you know? And I like, it's not just my dad. I've done it probably a million times before, you know, all this sort of stuff, but it's not a good trait to fall into if you want to have a better life, you know. I read somewhere that you were talking about like studies of coffee being bad and coffee being good and stuff, and there's like that whole big thing coming out, you know, or that did come out, and it was like wine is, you know, alcohol is great because it gives you plenty of antioxidants, especially red wine. It's beautiful, you know, and apparently like the amount of wine it would take to actually get the reward of the antioxidants is like so much that you would have to pretty much have alcohol poisoning.
But I'd probably bet $1 million that the people behind that survey were the alcohol companies themselves.
Sure they were.
You know, like people don't do enough research.
Nah.
Like the internet is this amazing place, right?
Oh, sweet.
Like I'm a Google freak, you know, like you tell me something, I'll be like, oh yeah, really? And I'll be like pulling it out. Like just like, because I love having all the access to information at my fingertips. But the thing that people don't realize is anyone can put that shit on the internet. Yeah. You know, like anybody can get on the internet and be like, you know, red wine is the best thing ever. And then if you're a person that's looking for things to back up. Like I did a mouse experiment when I was a kid, like bred the meese and got them to run through the maze, and I wanted so desperately to prove that it worked. I twisted everything so the mice did exactly what I thought it would do, and I proved the theory, but probably fudged it a bit. And that's, you will always find the information to back up the argument that you want to make. Of
course.
And especially on the internet when there's people who are just throwing out bits of information that make them feel comfortable and allow for them to have the lifestyle they want as well,
Yeah, definitely. And especially the way the internet's set up. Like, you go on YouTube, recommended for you is a way to constantly, like, validate, oh, fuck, I'm right. Yeah, this is shit. Oh, yeah. Like, I remember I was talking to Matt before, like, 9-10 months ago, I got into, like, I really got into, like, US politics. And I was, like, really fascinated by it. And then I watched, like, one kind of, like, conservative sort of video. And then within weeks, I was like a real fucking like conservative. I wasn't nuts on it, but I was like, yeah, you know what? Facts don't care about your feelings. They're all this like real hectic shit. Yeah. And it took me, I don't know.
Did you lose a lot of friends?
No. Yes, I did. Yes.
Just checking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, but it was quite interesting because like, I came out of it and I was like, wow, like I just spent, not that I cared, but I just spent all this time like, trying to think of like good arguments to talk to people about this sort of stuff and like who cares? It doesn't even matter to me, like it was just I can't control any of this stuff that I'm getting so up and about over, but in a lot of the ways like we can be bred to become these things of habit, creatures of habit, And
I do think it is a matter of eventually the scales tipping, like I know my dad won't listen to this podcast, so I'll feel free to
Mr.
talk
Furneaux,
about
come on.
Mr. Burford.
Sorry, Mr. Burford. Mr. Furneaux was someone else.
Yeah. Furneaux was a married name for a work visa back in Canada a long time ago.
He's now Mr.
I mean, no disrespect for John Furneaux, but...
True.
So Mr. Burford, he, he'll eat a Cliff Bar because he thinks it's healthy, and within minutes, he's fuzzy and foggy and he can't see. And to me, that's a direct correlation. I'm like, that was like 300 grams of sugar that you just had, and now you're having this effect on your body, and yet it still doesn't flip that switch. So, I mean, that's the biggest thing is when you see someone you love doing things that, you want to, that that you could make it better. And the only thing I find is it really started straining our relationship because I'd walk in and he'd be eating breakfast. I'm like, Dad, there's gluten and you've got sugar and the coffee. What are you doing? And then he didn't like being around me as much too. So like I find that even though you know the information, you want to make change for the people that you love, like all I can do is lead by example. So Dad's always saying, wow, like you look the fittest you've ever been. And I'm like, gluten-free, just leading by example is probably the best that I could do. Yeah. Like, I mean, for me, the impact on my body of this lifestyle choice is so huge. Like, because I get bruised a lot, just doing a lot more archery, and like I keep hitting myself here. I get massive bruises and they're so thick in a day, and then I'll go to sleep and I'll wake up the next day and they're gone. So the body is just operating at just this high level of rejuvenation each night, and it's alkaline, so it's just flushing all the stuff that it needs to do. I heal so quickly. I've got so much energy, and it's all, so to me that's like, okay, well I can do that for me. I just can't.
I think that's a really important point to take away, especially for our listeners. It's like you can't change anyone, No. And I think the more you try to change someone, the more resistant to the change they will be. And we also have to recognize the fact that, we may not have it right, and like what really works for us may not work for them. So we always have to be on this constant state of wanting a better life for ourselves, and then also trying to do we need to be our own test bunnies, and everyone in the world, if they want a better life for themselves, we should always, I guess, want to develop and grow, to take that responsibility to try many different things, I think it's really important.
Yeah. I mean, and I just pull it back, if someone asks me like, wow, like you look like you're in good shape at the moment, what are you doing? Then I'll explain, and I'll sort of explain the reasons behind it. But, unless someone asks, I just realize that, I'm not you, like I'm not getting paid to give them advice about their life. So
yeah. So what else then? What else have you been up to? Since so we've established that it was 18 months ago that we hung out?
Yeah, reckon.
Yeah. Are you still doing anything in the stunt world, or is that just a past
No,
life now? Or?
that's been really, really hard for me to let go of.
Yeah.
When it was a massive goal and dream, and not one I had for a long time. I was 26 when someone suggested I should be a stunt performer, and I didn't even know they existed. I was sort of wandering around. I was an outdoor guide.
Why did they say that you should be a stunt?
Because I was playing this really cool game of gladiators, so with some school kids on some sand dunes. So had a couple of kids at the top and a whole bunch at the bottom, and I was like, "Gladiators, are you ready?" So we did this thing. I guess I did some backflip on the way down, and this kid was like, "You should be a stunt woman," and no idea who it was, but then it just sort of got in my head, and when I didn't want to be in the outdoors anymore. I still wanted a job that was different every day. It was super active and really challenging, and I'd always played superheroes as a kid. I was a bit of a Marvel geek, so I was always dressing up as Batman, or not Batman, but Batgirl, Supergirl, whatever. Wonder Woman. It was always those things for me. So it just seemed like an interesting career to move into that. And so from that moment, I'd always been like, right, I'm going to be a stunt performer. And then I worked so hard to achieve that goal that I was really proud of that identity. So letting go of that's probably been the hardest thing for me. And also coming to terms with the fact that I have this strange thing inside myself that doesn't allow me to acknowledge my own successes, what we were talking about. So even though I did 16 years in the industry, I won 2 awards for the stunt stuff that I did, I felt I failed, and
Really?
Yeah. And so it's just, I don't even know why, because...
What would have been success to you then if we explore
right.
that?
Well, see, that was the interesting thing. I don't know, maybe choosing to walk away from it rather than having it torn away from me, but I never would have walked away from it. And it really was getting very detrimental to who I was, both mentally and physically. So I needed to step away from the industry, and I wasn't listening to the universe. So the universe was like, all right, well, how about something you have no choice in listening
Absolutely.
to? So... you definitely can't work through your hamstring being completely torn off. So I mean, I know. See, I failed. It was the strangest thing for me because, I was working on this television series. It was the best job I think I've ever done, and I was having so much fun. But it was the hardest work I've ever done. I got to fight every day and was working with one of the best fight coordinators in America, and it was really fun. And it was probably a job for 2 female stunt performers, but I was so determined to do every stunt. So I was really working hard, and I had to tackle a linebacker as one of the stunts. And he wasn't a stunt performer. He was just they call them action actors.
Right.
So you have to be really careful of them because they're quite physical and they believe that they're physical, but they can be really gung-ho and they just don't know how to... take a hit or move like a stunt performer. So there's a bit of a difference. Anyway, had to tackle this linebacker. So the first couple of takes, it was like, okay, dude, just be light on your toes. And it's not my job to tell him what to do. The stunt coordinator was sort of doing that. Be light on your toes. When she hits, you just go down. Okay, cool. So the first couple of takes did that. Third take, I guess nobody told him and we forgot to tell him. So I tackled him and instinct kicked in and he put his elbow up underneath my rib cage. And I was just like, oh, Jesus. And I was like, that was not good.
Yeah.
And I sort of was like, oh man, I think I might have broken ribs. But then the director's like, great. And I went flying, 6 foot flying, crashed on the ground. And the director's like, love it, let's do it again. And I was like,
yeah.
And I was like, nah, well, that's my job. So I got up and I did it again. And sweating from the pain a bit, but I'm like, no, I can handle this. And then the next day I had to do another fight sequence where I was getting thrown to the ground continually. And I knew I was in trouble because I couldn't really cough very well, but I was like, no, I've got to do this fight sequence the next day. So by the end of that day of being thrown to the ground, my whole body just went into shock and I went to the hospital and I'd collapsed my lung and cracked a couple of ribs. So there's nothing you can do about that. So I was like...
Do the directors get up, because it's Hollywood, I can only assume they're either going to go 2 ways. They're either going to be really annoyed and upset and pissed off, or they're going to be quite caring and considerate. Or that you were in hospital, you cracked a...
Nah, you just get on with it. You
just
know,
do it?
like, yeah, I mean, the production knew I went to hospital and they were like, you okay? And I'm like, yeah, sure,
cold sore.
let's just keep
On the
going.
belly.
Yeah. And, you know, breathing into this thing to reinflate the lung, you know, I
Yeah.
was like, okay, we'll just get on with it. And then,
Shit.
so the next fight sequence we did, we had to start rehearsing for it the next day. And I was like, it's okay, you know, like, let's just not do any hits here. So, you know, like, anytime I got thrown, they were throwing me from this side and I was like, just fighting as normal, just sort of nursing it. And then 2 fight sequences later, I was fighting with another action actor and he was swinging a pool cue around. And we do have rubber ones, but this one he was using the real one and he forgot the sequence of moves. So part of it is he swings the pool cue at me and I have to duck under it and like come up and do another move. And he did that move like 3 moves too early. So all I could do was like get my hand up and the pool cue smashed my hand. And everyone heard it and everyone's like, and I'm like, keep going, you know, like, so you don't want to waste the take. So we finished the whole take and I looked at my hand and it was just like, cool. And everyone's like, what do we need to do? I said, we need to keep filming this fight sequence. Had like shattered the bones, like here you can see it.
Yeah,
so then I've
wow.
got like cracked ribs and a broken hand.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we can keep fighting. So then I was like,
So you're fine.
right. So then rather than do any punching moves, we were doing all like elbows and blocks
yeah.
from this side and punches from that and trying to avoid the ribs. And then,
Shit,
so then the hamstring went. And then I kept fighting on the hamstring for another 10 episodes too, but we
Wow.
just would work. That's why it fell off eventually. We
Yeah.
just work around it, like, so no kicks on this leg, no punches with his hand, no things.
Wow.
Like, I just wasn't listening to the signs, you know.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I just loved it and wanted to keep going, but it really wasn't for me anymore.
So if you felt like a failure, what is your definition of success now? And how close are you to being fulfilled in that?
That's a really good question. I don't think I've defined success for me from here. I have. So when I realised I would have to get out of stunts, I started putting a game plan in action, and my game plan was to be the host of my own TV show. So we look at reality television, and the role models for women and girls on reality TV are the epitome of everything that's sort of the negative characteristics of females, so-called cliche female characteristics. And my nieces were like, I want to be Paris Hilton's BFF, you know, like that's what they want to do with their life. And they believe that the way you interact with human beings is by screaming and yelling and pouting and all that sort of thing. So I realized that, you know, whereas we're okay with having these really strong female role models on television in fiction, we haven't let that come into non-fiction yet. So there are some strong women, but then everyone's like, yeah, but they're butch and they're manly and they could do that because they're that. So my goal became to become a host of my own TV show so I could prove that women can be feminine and strong, and, you know, exhibit behaviours that females could emulate and be proud of, you know, and know that you could be self-reliant and self-confident, and not that you don't need men, because I am not an avid feminist. Like, oh, please open my door, carry my groceries, you know, like I believe men should be men. And
Okay.
except for you can be whatever you like. But you know, like I feel that men are lost too, because women are expecting them to be way more feminine with what they're, you know, and they're taking these things away from men. And then they are like, we got what, nobody knows who they're supposed to be and how they're supposed to be. That's why I love the outdoors, you know, like it's
Working
awesome.
together.
Yeah, you know, and
sure.
and so I think that is my goal. I consider it a success if I had my own TV show with me as the host of it, showing, you know, I don't really care what I do, but hopefully it would be nature. For me, in order to get people to love nature, you have to show it to them in its best possible light. Too often on television, we've gone like this, don't go out there, it's really scary. And honestly, my episode of Naked and Afraid, I wouldn't venture out the front door after watching that either. You know, it looks scary, it looks terrible, it was horrible, you know. But I think that Steve Irwin left a huge hole in the world as far as people that are passionate about the outdoors and getting outdoors. So if I could be the host of my own TV show that, you know, featured the outdoors in a really positive light, that would be success for me.
So why don't you consider yourself a success now?
I do now.
Okay.
But I had to do a lot of work on it. And I don't know why. I think that was just this thing in me that I never felt good enough. You know, I mean, I'm sure that we all have it. And we either recognize it or not to varying degrees. But to me, it was about not celebrating the successes. Like I went to a country, I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any transferable skills. I was not the right look or shape to be a stunt double. And, and I had all these things working against me. And I became a stunt performer in Hollywood. I succeeded.
Yeah, for sure.
But there's that thing in you that is like, I could probably only remember 3 stunt days that I finished and went, yeah, I did a great job.
Killed it.
Like there's always that part of you that's like, well, I could have done that a little bit better. And so I think it is, again, that learned behavior that we're talking about as far as being positive. You also have to learn to back off on the judgment of yourself, and acknowledge the cool things that you can do and the successes. And I think I just had to learn that. I don't know where it came from. I think I've always been very self-critical, and always looking how I can do better next time. So I think that was all part of it. But yeah, it was a very strange thing to realize when I walked away from something that I didn't feel like I'd succeeded, even though I'd achieved more than I ever hoped.
And probably more than what people that have wanted to be stunt performers their whole lives will ever do.
Right. The Taurus World Stunt Award, they've only had 13 or 14 of them ever, because that was just something the actors in Red Bull came up with when they realized that we didn't get any acknowledgement at the Oscars. So they were just like, wow, there's all these people that are really busting their ass. These are the people putting their lives on the line for our entertainment, and we're not getting acknowledged. So they came up with these World Taurus Stunt Awards, and it's a huge deal. It's voted from all of the peers in the world. And so to get one of these, it's the epitome of a stunt career. And so I never dreamed that big. There was no way I was ever going to get a stunt award. Only the best of the best got that. So
it's just a shame that you didn't get it, unfortunately. No, I'm joking.
And it's this big, and it's in Mum and Dad's living room.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. I remember when we were chatting last time, you mentioned that you perform, you touch a tattoo or something just before you go out and make a public speech. Is that something you still do?
I keep that in mind.
Okay.
So basically I have a tattoo that says, I'm not afraid I was born to do this. And everyone thinks it was for stunts, but it was for public speaking. Because when my book came out, I had to talk to a lot of people and I would get terrified. And it's part of that thing that, it happens for me. I don't know how many other people it happens for, but I'm like, why me? I still find that with my motivational speaking. When you live a life, it just seems like it's nothing extraordinary. You're just going through day to day. And so I still really struggle with the idea that anything I have is of benefit to anyone else, So standing...
I think we can all nod to that.
Yeah. So standing up in front of a group of kids, it's like, why me? What am I doing? I shouldn't even be here.
Yeah.
I'm still one of you.
Yeah, exactly. And this is just silliness, and they're really simple things. And, now... I'm probably less so. I've done a lot more of it. But still I use it for a lot of things. Just recently filmed a teaser for my own TV show.
Oh, sick. That's awesome.
Yeah, which is featuring the outdoors in a positive light. But a teaser is just something that a production company looks at you and says, you know what, we think you have enough potential to get on television, so we're going to believe in you. So they make
That's huge.
What they call a sizzle reel or a teaser. It's like a 2-minute promo of a show they think you'd be good in, and then they shop it around. So one of the biggest production companies in Australia did that one for me. They do Outback Truckers and Opal Hunters, and so it was a really huge thing. They got a professional director in to do it, and so that just recently got finished, and they're going to shop that around. But going into that, I was like, oh my God, I'm not good enough, and everyone's going to see, and everyone's going to realize that I don't know much about survival, which is absolute crap, because I wrote a book and I know what I'm doing. I've done a lot of episodes of reality TV. I know what I'm doing. But that's the sort of thing that I just sit back and think okay, now this is everything. I'm not afraid. Everything's come to this moment, and this is what I was born to do. So I still use it.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that perspective, because it's one thing where you grow up and you just naturally fall into these things, and then you're like, well, fuck, why does anyone care at all about what I'm doing here? But then you look, and then lots of people have no idea. I remember Mac and I had a conversation that actually blew my mind more than you probably know it did. we were in Iceland actually, just leading a trip on adventure. But
2018 coming up in December.
we're doing it again. But anyway, we were having a chat, and Mac was talking about some of the people that he's dealt with nutrition and all this sort of stuff, and we're all pretty health conscious and all this sort of stuff, so we know that drinking a lot of water is good, and trying to have like whole foods with good sort of levels of balanced macronutrients and things, and we know meditation is good, and being mobile is good. And I remember you said that you spoke to someone that thought it was okay that she wasn't drinking any water in a day and having 6 coffees a day and not eating until whatever, and it just fascinated me that like people, and everybody's an expert at something, and there are things that I don't even know that I'm fucking up real bad. Absolutely, but it just fascinated me that like some people can just have absolutely no idea in what I would assume to be integral parts of healthy living. You know what I mean?
I can't believe I get paid for what I do.
Yeah.
It's just, it's just there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sure.
And it seems like common sense, doesn't it?
That's what I mean. Yeah.
And like, I get up and I talk about these 4 attitudes, and it's just like be positive, be prepared, be adaptable, and educate yourself. And I'm like, I know these are common theories, but it's uncommon for people to use them in an everyday practice. And that's all I'm suggesting is like focus on these things every day. But they are simple. Drink more water. Like, like I shouldn't even be telling you this.
Yeah.
We should be doing it.
Yeah.
But I think what people don't get is the how. Like how do I when people say to me, how do I drink more water? I'm like, okay, well, look, get 2 water bottles and just make sure at the end of the day you finish them. And they're like, oh, like, well, that I can do.
So I don't have to inject it?
Right, but it's like they have a visible goal and they can...
Tangibility.
Right, and it's just like somebody not airy-fairy going, drink more water, and you're having to think, well, is that 8 glasses or is that this or is that? Like just providing them with what seems to me to be a really sensible key, but... to someone else that don't think about it.
Yeah.
And I also on like the point that you're saying about, I think it's really important, like you guys just doing this podcast and opening it up and chatting it, and making time and giving energy and effort to that, even though, I don't know how you feel about it, but I know at some stage you and Bill were talking about whether or not you were going to keep going with it or what was the point of it all, but every one person that listens to it and finds a key in it, you've changed the world, So last night I did this motivational speaking at Warragul, and I was talking to these business managers and the people they represent. And I got in there and it was like a whole bunch of farmers and really old people, and that's not generally my audience. I'm saying to these people, like, don't let others put limits on you and go for your big goals and dreams.
Yeah,
and like,
whatever I want.
But it's like they're like 85. Like their goal and dream is to their goal and dream is to go home and be in bed right now. And I just put all that aside. I was like, you know what? It doesn't matter. I'm just going to tell my story. And
100%.
Right. And maybe one person in the room will walk away. There was like 200 or 300 people there. I'm like, maybe one person will walk away with something. At the end of the night, this like 85-year-old guy came up to me, like he barely walk, and he sat down and he said, I just wanted to let you know that what you talked about was so relevant to me. He said, I had a thing where my blood pressure went down and I passed out about 1.5 years ago, and I've had terrible anxiety ever since and slight depression. And he said, and every time I come to a public event, I usually get carted off in an ambulance. And he said, but some of the things you said tonight were so relevant to me. And he said, and I'm going to put them into practice. He said, I really think it will help. And I was just like almost in tears.
Yeah.
I'm just like, that's why I do it,
For sure.
You can't pick who it's going to impact, and you can't choose who'll take something away from it, and it's the unexpected, and the fact that he got through that entire event and didn't end up being carted out in an ambulance because of something I'd said was just like amazing.
And it's also like just to, honestly, like pump the tires up a little bit more here as well, is that like for someone who's 85 years old to have had like maybe poor habits like ingrained in his life for that long to make a change at that time, like it's massive. Yeah, absolutely massive.
That's what I thought as well. Because most of them are like, oh, what's the point? I don't know. I'm
already dying.
Life's been good. I've lived it this way forever. So it was, it was
I just wonder if sometimes that like maybe sometimes people don't know how to change habits and things as well, but like I just wonder sometimes that maybe people like know exactly what they need to do, but they just don't because they just don't really want to. Like,
Right,
there's something in there, you know?
They probably don't want to admit that it's their fault.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. I think that really is a big one.
Yeah, because that's the thing I don't get.
Yeah.
You know, like 25% disabled, I'm so fit, strong and healthy. Like, why wouldn't you choose to be that way? You know, if you know what it takes. And, you know, there is that stigma around, well, I'd have to give up too much of the things I love. And I eat so well. You know, like the food I make, and like, I mean, I still eat chocolate, but I make it myself, you know, like, so it's sugar free and I just mix it up and I love the taste of it. You know, like, there's nothing I'm depriving myself of. Like, my mate had his birthday, and he, because of the thyroid thing, gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, and he has to be egg-free as well, because even the grains from the chicken eating that then lays the egg, like, messes him up.
Whoa. So he's super inflamed.
Super. And so I made him a chocolate cake for his birthday with keeping all of those things in mind, and he like took one bite and got all teary, and he's just like, I never thought I'd be able to eat chocolate cake again. And like, my niece was there, and she's such a fussy eater, and she ate it. It was like chocolate cake, you know.
Yeah.
So it doesn't take much, and you're not depriving yourself, you know. It's just getting around that mindset. And to me, cooking vegetarian for so many years, that's a pain in the butt to make good veggie food. To me, just going home and cooking up some lamb chops and some greens is so much more simpler, you know. And so it's not actually a harder lifestyle choice. It's just, you know, that's just another excuse about why you perhaps wouldn't do it.
Well, like, I mean, people, that's so funny to me that people, it's like, oh, but I mean, there's so much stuff you have to give up. It's like, what? Like, mental health issues and obesity and fucking dying early. Like, what do you mean?
And like, sugar is a major cause of inflammation. Like, my mum, if she's off sugar, she doesn't have arthritis. If she has sugar, she's on arthritis. Do you think she's going to give up the muffin with coffee? No, she's going to have sore fingers, you know? So you're just like, come on now. Like,
absolutely. Yeah.
It's just strange, the choices.
Kai, we probably should wrap things up soonish, I think. But I wanted to ask, there's a question that I don't think we asked you. I don't think Bill asked you it was late 2016, I think. So could you recommend one book to the listeners, or one book? Did we ask you this one?
You did.
Oh, we did?
Yeah.
Well, everything I just said is completely void now.
You did ask me about the book.
Kai, we...
You also asked me about people for dinner. And
I can't remember what you said.
Time ago.
Do you reckon you would have changed that?
No,
answer?
it's still, I think it was like Indiana Jones and Princess Leia, remember? Because then we had the whole conversation about how awkward that would be because of like the whole Han Solo thing. And
super awkward. Yeah. Super awkward. Yeah. Well, what was the book then? Do you remember the book?
I can't remember.
What's a book? What would be a book now? Apart from your own book.
Yeah. Girls Own Survival Guide.
Yeah.
Yeah. Penguin.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah. Gosh. See, I probably haven't read any really good books for a long time because I've been doing the like looking the stuff up on YouTube. So yeah, sorry, I'm drawing a blank.
That's all right. Well,
I like sci-fi fantasy, so
which ones?
Well, I mean, you know, I was always
Arthur
like George R. Martin.
Yep, very good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about the book then. So, you're currently writing a new one, though, aren't you?
Yeah, so that was a really interesting process for me as well because they decided on this one they wanted me to have a co-writer.
Okay.
On the first book, I just wrote it completely on my own.
Yep.
And my agent loves my writing style, but she wanted to get more depth of emotion out of me because, you know, I'm very much a person that doesn't acknowledge the maybe pain and suffering. Like, this is probably the most honest podcast I've ever done about the where you go to and how all that feels. And so that was a big learning experience for me as well because I was like, aren't women meant to be like really good on that emotional stuff?
Yeah.
But no, I had to hire a man to help me get in touch with my emotions.
Yeah.
And it turned out that didn't really work out very well anyway, but it was like just that acknowledgement that perhaps I wasn't acknowledging some of the deeper emotions around things. And, you know, people actually can relate if you open up and share a little bit more honestly about who you are and what you went through. Whereas I'm definitely more like, everything's going great.
It's funny that, like, that phrase, like, in touch with your emotions, derives some sort of like negativity or like some sort of like, oh, you mean sadness and like anxiety and, you know, I mean, but emotions like scale from happiness to joy and excitement as well.
Right. And that's where I am like 95% of the time, but you definitely, you know, I think it's okay when I was in the wheelchair to acknowledge that was a situation that really sucked, you know.
Yeah.
So that was where I think there's the difference between denial and, you know, and perhaps being positive. And I was definitely a bit in denial at times. So it was good for me to realize that being more honest about what I went through could actually help more people. So writing, the second book will be related to the stunt world, and the first one was a survival book and looked at how you can use attitudes of survival to get through life. And this one will be like looking at the attitudes in the stunt world and getting through life with that. So definitely be focused on that. Girl's Own Survival Guide is actually completely sold out. I have the only remaining copies, and I'm looking at getting the license back from Penguin at the moment, so I can because I don't want to do a big batch.
Okay.
And I want to be able to still have that book available for people because,
Definitely.
you know, I get a lot of good feedback about it. And, you know, I was stoked. Like, I sat down in 8 days and wrote that book, and it sold like 10,000 copies in Australia and 6,000 in America. So I was like, when I found that out, like, because Penguin called me up and they said, oh, you know what, we printed 10,000 copies and they're almost sold out. We've got the last 20 copies here. Would you like them? And I was like, you got 20 copies left? Like, I thought they'd be like, so we have like 8,000 copies.
Exactly.
Do you have room in your shed?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So,
in your block of land.
Yeah, exactly.
How big is Torquay?
Yeah. Do you have room for 8,000 copies of your book? When I wrote it and when they published it, I honestly thought it'd be like one of those things that'd be like mum, dad, and a couple of my relatives. But yeah, so that was really cool. But
amazing.
I'm going to have that available, but I'm just going to publish a smaller batch next time.
Okay.
So
Cool.
Awesome.
Great. Well, it's been great to have you on the show again.
yeah, lovely speaking with you.
Yeah, for sure. And finally, any little thing you want to plug or anything coming up apart from the book?
No, nothing I want to plug. I did do a super top secret survival show, which will be out in July. So if anyone's a fan of Shark Week,
Nice.
that would be my biggest hint to you. Keep an eye out on Shark Week, July 22nd, because there's going to be some stuff coming out that I did recently for Discovery. So I'm super excited.
Bit of
Awesome.
flake. Excellent. Sounds good. Keen. All right. Well, that's a wrap.
Discovery Roger, go for deploy.